Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How everybody is doing today? I'm doing so great today,
You
Good
are.
with a
morning,
little bit of
everyone.
cold, but everything good today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Jenny.
Morning. I'm here in freezing Fort Worth. It's 3 degrees, and we've had an ice storm.
3 degrees in Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes, yes. It gets. Last year we had freezing weather for 2 weeks, and an
Oh my
ice
God.
storm, and 200 people died this year. Where it's going to be bad, very bad today and tomorrow.
Mm-mm. Lee, how is it up in the Boston area?
The ice pelts are just starting to fall, and so we're just getting the the tip of Landon. And Jenny, I guess the other side of Landon is just leaving you. It's 2,000 miles long. This ice
Right.
storm is immense.
It is. It is. Really, and the problem here is that we're not prepared. We don't have the because it's rare. We don't have the
The big
ability to deal
machines.
with it.
Sure.
Your infrastructure. Yeah, up here we are pretty much bulletproof in the Northeast. But
Yeah,
I think we sent some people down your way.
yeah. I last year the grid failed, and we had 200,000 people had no power for it. It was devastating.
I remember.
So anyhow, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah,
Well,
Glad you're
Lee, I
safe
hope
and well.
you're able to stay. Go ahead.
Nobody's going anyplace.
No.
Our thoughts are with you, Ginny. Be safe.
Mhm.
Pardon?
I said, be safe out there.
Well, I'm not going to go out there. I'm staying in there, and I've got a cat that won't get off my lap. He and
Good.
yesterday was the most awful day. Our fire alarm in our building went off for hours, and there were four firemen here, and they could not shut the alarm off. And it
Oh
just
my
went
God.
on. So my cat is like he's a ball of nerves, and I can't move. And if I move, he bites me.
That is so funny.
Well,
What a
Lee,
little
I
cat.
hope Lee, I hope you're able to stay nice and warm where you are.
I'm fine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Dr. Natalie. How are you this morning?
Good morning.
The Olympics are starting right now.
Oh boy, this is the greatest time of the even yeared years. I love watching the Olympics. That's awesome. All right, I've got lesson 35 in front of me, and
You need
I'm
to
ready
share
to
it with your
go.
dad.
I think he sees it. I
I
do
do.
need to do this though. I gotta pin Dad there so we keep him on camera. And yeah, he can see.
Okay, great.
Ouch! I've just been
Oh
pinned.
no. What? Yeah. All right.
Listen, everybody, in North Carolina yesterday, it was 60 degrees outside.
Good for
So
you.
y'all come here.
I lived in North Carolina in Durham, and the kids had a snow day, and it was sunny, and they called
Oh
the
my
snow day,
goodness.
and the sun came out.
That sounds like somewhere in the 80s. I think I had one or two of those when I was a kid in North Carolina.
It was
Hey,
1976.
Buggy. Sweet. Welcome back, Buggy. All right,
Lee was
I'm going to read
definitely a
lesson
kid then.
I'm going to read lesson 35. My mind is part of God's. I am holy. Today's idea that my mind is part of God's mind, I am very holy, does not describe the way you see yourself now. Today's idea that my mind is part of God's mind and I am very holy does, however, describe what vision will show you. Hey, Dad, you want to put your mute on for me?
Yep.
It is difficult for anyone who thinks he's in this world to believe this idea that his mind is part of God's mind. I am very holy of himself. Yet the reason he thinks he is in this world is because he does not believe that his mind is part of God's mind and that he's very holy. You will believe that you are part of where you think you are. You will believe that you're part of where you think you are because you surround yourself with the environment you want. And you want that environment to protect the image of yourself that you have.
Try that again.
The image that you made of yourself is part of this environment. What you see, while you believe you're in the environment that you created to support your own viewpoint or story, it's seen through the ideas of the image. This seeing what you believe is not vision. Images cannot see. The idea for today presents a very different view of yourself. By establishing your source, which is God's mind, this idea establishes your true identity. And this idea describes you. This idea, which is this lesson today, right? The idea that my mind is part of God's mind and I am very holy, describes you as you must really be in truth. We will use a somewhat different kind of application for today's idea that my mind is part of God's mind and I am very holy. Because the emphasis for today is on the perceiver rather than on what he perceives. For each of the 3 5-minute practice periods for today, begin by repeating today's idea that your mind is part of God's mind and you are very holy to yourself, and then close your eyes and search your mind for the various kinds of descriptive terms in which you see yourself. Include all of the ego-based attributes you ascribe to yourself, positive or negative, desirable or undesirable, grandiose or debased. All of these ego-based attributes are equally unreal because you do not look upon yourself through the eyes of holiness. In the earlier part of the mind-searching period, you will probably emphasize what you consider to be the more negative aspects of your perception of yourself. That is what we do. Toward the latter part of the exercise period, however, more self-inflating descriptive terms may well cross your mind. Try to recognize that the direction of your fantasies about yourself really doesn't matter. The illusions have no direction in reality. Both negative and positive illusion are merely not true. A suitable selected list for applying today's idea might be as follows. I see myself as imposed upon. I see myself as depressed. I see myself as failing. I see myself as endangered. I see myself as helpless. I see myself as victorious. I see myself as losing out. I see myself as charitable. I see myself as virtuous. You should not think of these terms in an abstract way. They will occur to you as various situations, personalities, and events in which you figure cross your mind. Pick up any specific situation that occurs to you. Identify the descriptive term or terms you feel are applicable to your reactions in that situation, and use these terms and situations in applying today's idea that your mind is part of God's mind and you are very holy. After you've named each one, add, but my mind is part of God's and I am very holy. During the longer exercise periods, there will probably be intervals in which you do nothing. There will be intervals in which nothing specific occurs to you. Don't strain to think up specific things to fill the interval. Merely relax and repeat today's idea that my mind is part of God's mind and I am very holy. Slowly, until something occurs to you. Although nothing that does occur should be omitted from the exercises, nothing should be dug out with effort. Neither force nor discrimination should be used. As often as possible during the day, pick up a specific attribute or attributes you are ascribing to yourself at the time and apply the idea for today to those attributes, adding the idea in the form stated above to each of those attributes. If nothing particular occurs to you, merely repeat the idea that my mind is part of God's mind and I am very holy to yourself with closed eyes. That is the lesson for today. So, good morning, everybody. Jenny, thank you for sharing with us. I'm glad you're safe in that storm and staying warm. I think today's lesson is going to be great for us. I'm going to walk us through it after I read through the notes. And good morning, everybody. Hey, Jordan. Thank you all for joining me. I'm grateful you're here. Afnan, it's good to see you. And Dr. Natalie, I hope you're having a good day and you had good sessions yesterday. Tom, how are you doing? I don't
I'm
want to catch
fine.
anybody unawares.
Excellent.
Good. Excellent is excellent. Wonderful. All right. Off to the races. My mind is part of God's. I'm very holy. I stated earlier that A Course in Miracles is simple because it's always black and white. There's no gray. Something's either true or it isn't true. However, it's possible for someone to believe, imagine, or perceive that the false is true and the true is actually false. This erroneous belief has no ability to change the reality of truth. It only appears in the imagination of the deluded mind of the thinker until he or she rediscovers the truth. Your provisional reality is the result of your current beliefs. Within time, you can change your erroneous beliefs to align with truth. And that is truth with a capital T. Today's idea that my mind is part of God's mind and that I'm very holy is not how our fear-based thought system chooses to describe us. Since everything ultimately is either true or false, we can state the opposite of today's idea, and we will have correctly described the ego's interpretation of who you are. Your ego believes the following: my mind is separate from God's mind, and I am very unholy. Although you have been brought up to identify your existence as your ego, this is not the case. Your ego is your current beliefs about yourself. It's not your existence. Your beliefs can be and are radically different from your true reality. Yet your beliefs cannot change the truth that you remain as God created you, perfect, whole, and complete. The truth remains that your mind is part of God's mind, and therefore you must be very holy. To be holy is to be whole. You're part of the oneness that is the mind of God. Your belief that somehow your mind is separate from the mind of God and that you're very unholy colors your imagination and projects an environment that supports your ego's worldview of limitation, lack, struggle, conflict, and fear. When you identify and believe that you're a limited, separate ego body, your egoic mind imagines a world that supports your belief in separation. This image includes the physical world, your physical body, and its physical senses through which you interact with this outside world. You claim to see the separate, autonomous world that your mind has surrounded itself with. This imagined outer world was created to support your ego's inner vision of who you are. The source of these images must come from your mind, yet you perceive these images to actually be real and separate from your mind. Your egoic mind is the power source that these images, your egoic mind is the power source that these images, that imagines them in the first place. Anyway, it's our egoic mind that creates these images, and then we imagine them in the first place. And I read it 3 or 4 times incorrectly and still got it wrong, but you get it. Because you believe that you are where you think you are, this imagined world becomes your provisional reality. Your egoic mind believes that your mind is separate from the mind of God, and you are very unholy. Your ego will argue for the reality of its delusional world vision. Your ego would rather claim that it is right, even when it's proven wrong. The ego's insane need to be right comes at the cost of your happiness. Your higher self, or your inner guide, knows the truth that your mind is part of God's mind, and you are very holy. Your higher self does not need to argue for the truth, since truth just is. The false cannot change truth's reality. Truth is invulnerable. Your ego is not who you are. Your ego is not your friend. Your egoic mind argues for the rightness of its own current belief system. To your ego, it's more important to argue for the correctness of its beliefs rather than to seek the truth. Your ego prefers to cling to its erroneous beliefs rather than admit that it's wrong. Your ego needs to be right, even when its plan is obviously not working. It's more important for your ego to be right than to be happy. Your ego will argue for the rightness of its plan at the cost of both your happiness and the truth. What type of friend is so close-minded that they would refuse to consider other plans when they know that their current plan has only produced misery and suffering for their partner? Whew, what an asshole. Would a true friend argue for the rightness of their failed and bankrupt plan when it's continually costing you your happiness? Tom, that's a tough question to answer in any way other than, oh my God, no. Holy cow, no. But I'd love to hear anybody argue for the ego's rightness right now. All right, let's hear what you guys have to say, and we'll run through one of these together and probably be on our way and have a wonderful day. It's almost 7 a.m. and we're really off to the races.
The defense rests.
Welcome on up, Janine. I'd love to hear what you have to say too. Anybody's welcome.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Oh, this is such for me this morning. Oh my gosh. Why is the ego such an asshole? I love how you said that. I'm going to start saying that. You asshole, shut up. Because it's so true. I mean, why is it so self-destructive? Yesterday I started, oh, not yesterday, actually, Andy and I started a room a couple days ago. And boy, did my ego beat me up. I mean, it just came for me. And even though it was so beautiful, the connections were great, everything was great, and my mind just went to town. So why does this happen? I know it's good for me to lead the room. I know that's what I wanted. I believe the Holy Spirit came through Andy and inspired her to inspire me. And so it's very interesting to me, and I can so see it. And thank you for this. I mean, I know you're following along with the book, but this is perfect timing in my life. But why is it so self-destructive? Our
I,
ego.
I yeah, I think it's easy to understand why it is so self-destructive when you understand that your individuated consciousness and what comprises consciousness. Consciousness arises from three things: assumptions, your beliefs, and your decisions that you make. Those three things. If we start examining those things, the first one is your assumptions. How did you get, if we're talking about this being as a one time deal, I just came into this life and I was a blank slate, which we can argue about. But if we just look at our assumptions, those assumptions were indoctrinated into us. When a baby is born, the baby sees the world with eyes of wonderment. Once society and parents and the peer group uh, gets involved with the interactions, they start re-educating, or I would prefer to use the word brainwashing or indoctrinating that new mind, that new, I'll say, ego body, that child, into a belief system that has a lot of different assumptions. The basic assumption that you're told is that you're an effect of your outside world, you're not causative, and that there's something wrong with you. You're not perfect, whole, and complete. It tells you that you're in competition with other ego bodies for all the needs that you need to get met. So once you start buying into the assumptions that you are the body, you're in trouble. Once you start buying into the assumptions that you're a earner that your mother said you have to be a good girl or a good boy or you can't get a reward, you start seeing yourself as not perfect, not whole, not complete, someone that has to earn love. And so it's a natural outcropping of the brainwashing that we get as a child. And that's been happening in, planet Earth for many, many centuries, and many, many lifetimes. So it's been our brainwashing. So our assumptions are that I am the body. The assumption is I was born in original sin or I'm a sinner. The assumption is that I've broken from God or God kicked me out or my great, 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 great grandparents got the boot and that I now am tainted. And what we have to realize is we are God's beloved child with whom she is well pleased. That's our story. That's our interpretation that we've been, our assumption that we've been brought up with. And we have to question the belief. So, what Course in Miracles is saying is your assumption, what you were taught, it's all screwed up. And the ego is not, that's not that the ego is stupid so much as the ego is logical based on its belief system. And it was told that it's the body. It was told that it's a sinner, that there's something inherently wrong with it in that it's an earner that has to earn reward and all those assumptions need to be overturned. And what the Course is going to say is, your assumptions, it's not that you're totally stupid. It's that your consciousness is comprised of assumptions, and those assumptions are false. Therefore, everything after that has to be false. We have to go back to the basic assumptions and say, unlike what the ego has been taught, that we're not whole, not perfect, and very incomplete, and that we lack, and that there's limitation, that we're perfect, whole, and complete. And whenever you start doing that, then now we've got a different baseline to start by. And now we just have to remove all the crap that's out there as opposed to what the ego has been taught that you are crap and somehow you have to change to become worthy of a crumb once in a while thrown your way. So it's not that the ego is so much stupid. It's just we've been brainwashed into a bunch of erroneous beliefs, and therefore we never challenge or question the truth. And if we start understanding, that's why I kind of harp on beliefs. If we start understanding what psychologists are saying and the power of beliefs by just our willy nilly saying, I'm going to change my assumptions about myself, you get a totally different thought system and you have a chance for happiness because you can never be happy if you believe that your base nature is lack, limitation, separation. You're screwed from the get go. And unless you question those things, you'll be stuck. So you can't escape fear within a fear-based thought system, and that's what we're told to do. I'm
All right, so we got to go away from the asshole, and this is how. We don't need to argue for the rightness of this guy in our head and the tapes that he plays.
Me.
Go ahead,
Sorry
Steph.
if the hot tub is on behind me, but I have
That's all right.
someone I brought Mary up. She would love to add her thoughts on this really quick. She's my twin flame. I just wanted her to share her point of view on this.
Okay. That sounds pretty awesome. It's a little hard to hear you. You're right, but I hope you enjoy it.
I missed that third one, Tom. It was lack, limitation, and what was that third one?
I believe it's separation.
Yeah, separation.
That's it. Thank you. And then, of course, from that, we then make wrong decisions because we're basing it off of erroneous beliefs.
Absolutely. We think that red light is green.
May I defend the ego a little bit?
Sure,
Ooh.
go for it. Yeah, go for it. Being
Not
devil's
now because
advocate.
I'm mad at it.
Come on, tell us how great
Well,
this
Kidding,
asshole is.
just kidding.
Just
a lot of what I agree with a lot of what Tom has to say. I think we use different vernacular to explain it. But I think the first thing we need to recognize is that our consciousness is not within our ego. It is not within our mind. And our consciousness is not something we create. In fact, all of the physical world is within consciousness. We're starting to get in quantum physics to the point where we're starting to look for the God particle, for if anyone knows of the Higgs boson and so on and so forth. We're starting to get to the point where consciousness is starting to become the thing that creates matter. So our consciousness, our seat of self, is separate from our ego and our emotions. So we are not our thoughts and we are not our emotions. We are the observer of these thoughts and emotions. And yet, when we incarnate, we don't incarnate as an individual, we incarnate into a society, which is like a body. That body doesn't care about individual cells, it cares about those cells performing their functions as a whole so that it continues to live on. The same way that you, as a person, don't care about a single kidney cell or a single eye cell or a single skin cell. You care about them all working together so that they keep you alive. So there's this dichotomy between what the individual wants and what the society wants from that individual. And when we are born into society, much like Tom said, we are put into somebody training. Our parents, our society, our school systems start teaching us how to become somebody, how to become, like he said, a worthy member of society. They're not necessarily talking to us about us. If you look at even religion, organized religion, it is never about that one person. It is about the relationship that person has with society, how to become accepted by society, how to measure up for other people to accept you. This is where that comparison by the ego comes in. We are taught by our superego, which is what we learn from our parents and our environment between the ages of 0 to 5. That becomes our superego. That becomes, in psychology, that becomes the programming that runs in the background no matter what. And it becomes very, very persistent. It becomes difficult to kind of change these ideas as you get older. And as you do them, you'll find them coming up over and over again in different facets. Having said that, we have awareness. There is this thing that says hurt people. That's the function of the ego. When it has learned a program, it is a dutiful servant. It will continue to use that same program over and over again, especially because as kids, when we are in our id section, when we are in the position of finding out how to use our meat suit, finding out exactly how to create relationships, speak, so on and so forth. These are all the functions of the mind. We need the ego in order to make sense of all of the physical stimuli that we are getting. This is why our mind has two parts. We have our subconscious mind and our conscious mind, which we call our ego or our psyche. Over the time, we start to create these walls within our mind that we call our personality, that we call our belief system, that we call the basis based on which we exhibit ourselves in this world. If we don't have an ego, we will never understand where we are, who we are, what is expected of us, and so on and so forth. So we need ego, we need the psyche, we need some of these limiting beliefs in order to be able to understand who we are and in order to be able to function. The beauty of us is recognizing that we can step beyond that. We can step back the same way as I don't know if you guys have ever talked about this here, but we have two ways of feeling something. We have associative feelings and disassociative feelings. So let's just play a little game here together. Whenever you guys think about your happy place, if I tell you right now, go to your happy place, what do you imagine? When you imagine yourself in that space, Are you within your body, in your own eyes, looking at a panoramic view, feeling the set? Are you within your body, looking out as you are in the normal sense? Most of us in our happy place have that kind of association. Now, I want you to stay in your happy place, but I want you to consciously step back as if that picture is in a flame. Leave yourself there and see yourself in that space as if it's in a picture frame. You'll find that the feelings that you were just having about your happy place start to become really dim. This is called disassociation, right? So when we see ourselves outside of ourselves, watching ourselves, this is disassociative feelings. When we are in it, we are associative. When we are in a moment of pain, we tend to be associative. We tend to put ourselves back in that moment fully. But with our happy moments, we tend to step outside and look at what was happening as if it's an old memory. The fact that we can do this tells you that our consciousness is outside of our cognitive abilities. It is outside of our ego. So the fact that we can step back and we can disassociate means we now have an opportunity to observe. We have the opportunity to observe the ego and observe our emotions. And if we can really listen to our emotions and not get engaged with the thoughts, because that's what the ego wants to do. Lee, you were just reading this. The
Yeah.
ego doesn't care about being right. The ego cares about continuing to talk. So if
Yeah.
you ever get into a place, they don't care what side of the argument they take. They just want to
As
keep talking.
long as they keep arguing.
Yeah,
Keep-
it just wants to keep talking. I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but let's say, especially the people with anxiety disorders, I'm one of them. I was the queen of anxiety until I learn not to think, not to engage. For example, you want to go out to a party and it starts saying things like, what if you don't know anybody there? Well, then I'll meet somebody. Well, what if they don't like you? Well, okay, then at least I know the host, I can talk to them. Well, what if they're so busy that they can, well, maybe they introduce me to somebody that I really like, and oh, but then what if you're not prepared? What if you become really popular? What if all of a sudden you're going? So it doesn't really matter what side of the argument they take, as it takes, as long as it can keep talking. That's what your ego wants to do. It wants to reassert the walls you've created that you call your personality. So it is there in order to protect us. It is not there to lead us down the wrong path. It is not there to be stupid. It is not there to be contrary. It is there to constantly bring up different ideas to keep you safe from danger. Ego wants to identify that thing which is going to bring you danger and prevent you from getting close to it. So it likes to keep you in your comfort zone. Where this becomes problematic is that growth is always on the other side of our comfort zone. And we as living creatures are comfort seeking organisms.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
we get bogged down in the ego. It is not the ego itself that is the problem. Tom mentioned, it is this idea of separation and lack that actually puts us in a place of believing in our ego and letting go of even things like our emotions. We don't pay attention to our emotions and our emotions within our body. So, sorry, I just wanted to defend the ego a little bit.
All right. You did a great job, Mary. I mean, my God, not only did you defend it a little bit, but you gave it a purpose, and that gives us a path out of it. And if it doesn't have a purpose that we can't peacefully let it pursue, then we can't let it serve the benefit that it gives us, which is enabling us to learn something to the point where we can like drive a car or ride a bicycle or do the automatic things that we have to do. And so I guess from a certain degree, it takes that learning and helps us build up societies and stuff too. And that doesn't mean that we can't move beyond it either. So we get both sides of this coin in a good way. Thanks.
That was well.
May
Oh,
I say something?
really
Of
appreciate
course,
that.
Yeah, that
Ma-
was so great, Mary.
Thank you, guys.
I'd like to ask Mary. you said in the beginning that physics and scientists and neurologists and all of the professionals are still looking for the God particle. Could you expand on that idea, please?
Sure. I don't want to take over the whole room and give you guys monologues, but there's this idea that at the time of the Big Bang, all of the particles were released sort of at the same rate, and yet not everything formed a planet. Not everything. They are finding that there were things that actually created differentials within the universe where some things went on and became planets and solar systems, and some things stayed as dust and particles around. And um, they are starting to talk about, so they about I want to say 10 years ago, this gentleman named Carl Higgs, talked about this particle called the boson particle that actually applied force at the time of the explosion of the Big Bang to create this gravitational differential that caused the creation of planets and solar systems and so on and so forth.
Odd
Uh,
part, right?
Yeah.
so they are starting to call the Higgs boson particle the God particle because it actually ended up having deterministic effects on what ended up being a planet and what didn't. They also, so going from that and doing things like the double slit experiment, where they have found that even subatomic particles seem to have consciousness, seem to be aware of when they're being observed, and they change their behavior based on the observation and based on the intentions of the observer. We're now recognizing that consciousness doesn't just need to be within living things, but that even things like photons have consciousness within them, which now has brought up this idea, especially in quantum physics, that all matter in fact starts from consciousness, and it just slows down enough to gather mass for us to be able to recognize it. But in overall, there is nothing but energy in this world. We all know that. And in some parts of physics, they're starting to talk about how matter is consciousness, and they're now looking at something beyond the Higgs boson particle called the God particle that starts matter altogether. So,
What I'd like to, I think that was brilliant and amazing that they've put that together, because I see it a little bit differently. I see it from perhaps the other side, because I'm not looking for a God particle. I found it. And when I look at the ideas that all these scientists have put together, it appears to me that so much of it is really all trying to justify its own viewpoints. And it seems to be getting more and more complicated, because now they're getting to a point where all these little pieces have consciousness. That's what I think I just heard you say. I hope I understood it right. Whereas what we're talking about in the Course in Miracles is from the other side of the same action, another way of looking at the same thing. And that is, it all started, actually, it started because something called God decided to start something. And then all of the little parts and pieces of God, they decided, with each with their own consciousness, to do this, to do that. But the original thing that made each of them into a God particle, a piece of God, was their self determination to separate from what was originally one, hence the Big Bang. And when each of these God particles started to separate, and they all started going hither, thither, and yon, they all had their consciousness with them, because they were a piece of the original one thing that decided to let these parts make their own decisions. They took off and they each made their own decisions. And that's where we are, in a sense, now. In the Course in Miracles, we're trying to get back to the source of all of these, of us. which we are the God particles, and each of us, whether it's a big God particle or a small one, it all fits together much more simply. One of the first things that Lee read, in which Tom explains in his book, and that's where these notes come from, is that it's really kind of simple, folks. It's black and white, and it simplifies a lot of the things that seem to complicate the physicists, the scientists, especially the psychologists, because remember that it was this book, we believe, I think you're aware of this, Mary. I don't know how long you've been with Course in Miracles. It could be longer than me. I don't know. I'm just saying, from my perspective, either God is or isn't. To say that physicists are beginning to believe that there is a thing that we're calling God particle, I mean, they're approaching this thing from their side of looking at the multiplicity of all of these different things with different names, when it seems to be more black and white now for me to say there is God. Each of us tried to separate or wants to separate. And the more we try and separate from this original God source, the more we have little egos popping up and saying, I'm better than yours. I'm a bigger God particle than you are. And of course, that makes no sense. But it all depends upon where we start and where we start looking. And Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, decided to dictate this book to two teachers who taught psychology at Columbia University. He picked them for a reason. I don't pretend to know exactly what the reason was, but they were pretty good picks. So I think this is fascinating because you've just given me um, a better idea of what's going on. I'm going to stop talking here and let others come on in. Thanks.
Here's a fundamental difference between what we start off with, and this is a basic assumption. For many years, there used to be an axial, a dualistic model, and then they went to an axial model. But the whole idea of science is that they believe, and the scientific revolution came about because they believed that they could explain everything through physical laws with physics. They believed that they would be able to explain uh, everything that we see in the world based on known physical laws. And what this new paradigm is coming up with is saying that rather than the idea that physicality caused consciousness, maybe consciousness caused physicality. There's an unsolvable problem that physics is trying to solve, and that's the idea of where did consciousness arise from? And they've been looking for the last 200-300 years trying to explain consciousness coming from physicality. And now, especially with quantum field theory, where they say that we have to consider consciousness, that we know that now consciousness has the ability to fix for when we observe something. That's the only time that they cease to be in a superimposed state. They become, physical and observed. So now they're starting to realize that perhaps they got it backwards, and that consciousness causes physicality. And if you take that assumption, everything starts turning on its head. That's why, like, they're looking for a theory of everything, and the only thing that they can do in their theory of everything is deal with the 5% that they can measure. They know that there's another 95%, which they call dark matter and dark energy. They have no clue as to what that is. Perhaps that's consciousness. Who knows? But this idea that consciousness came first and creates physical matter is now looking to be, science is starting to come around and say, hey, that might be the case. And that puts us a whole lot different than what we have been brought up with, the idea that we're a bag of bones, and they've never been able to explain how consciousness arrived. You know, they can talk about process and all that other stuff, but that's the basic fundamental shift. Did physicality create consciousness, or does consciousness create physicality?
And
Thank you.
that's why it's so important, the oneness concept. I mean, in order for us to have all the like integration of what we are speaking here is understanding that everything needs to be integrated within ourselves in order for us to have that oneness feeling. And in that oneness, the answers will be uh, so obvious that everything will be like solved like a puzzle. So in my mind is, if my mind is part of God and I'm very holy, then I should behave accordingly, and whatever I create in this world will be God's doing, not my doing, or not a consequence of physicality. So I guess if every one of us do its job internally with every conflict that we encounter during our day-to-day activities, we are going to be helpful for the greater collective consciousness to find those answers that give us more clues that we are heading to the right direction. There's something that happened to me when I started to read the book A Course in Miracles, and it was, I have been always curious about science and all those things. I'm not any any expert on this field, but I do love those subjects. And I have always been like curious and following news about the black holes advances and things like that, no, in terms of the knowledge they got from them. And when I started with the course, then in Netflix, out of the sudden, they roll out a documentary about how the first picture of a black hole was made, and they showed the entire process, and they showed the entire work they had to do. There was this too, mathematics with a girl, something like that, that they had to do so many calculus, and well, it has a lot of amazing things, that documentary. But when it ended, for me it was like, of course I'm seeing this, because now I'm getting my way to find my own black hole. I mean, what is a black hole? What we know about a black hole? We know just it is like this part of our understanding of the universe that will like grab all the matter and just like absorb it, and it's black, and they are just beginning to understand what happens afterwards. The black hole like swallows all the matter, right? And if you see what we are doing here with this Course in Miracles, is probably something very similar about it. We are entering our darkness with a different perspective, and out of that will always comes several universe. I mean, different universe. I'm experiencing that right now, because I was like running away from my own darkness, uh, thinking that I was doing better in my life, but it wasn't. I was just running away from my consciousness, from my oneness experience, and I never saw it like that. And the Course in Miracles helped me to start to look at my own darkness differently, and as a gateway to really experience the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven is just everybody considered as one. I mean, I'm not longer in a position, because my mind already knows that, and it's like riding a bike. There's no way to go back. I no longer can see any conflict that I face with the same eyes that I did before, and I'm encountering that in a greater level, on a level like more broader, on a broader level, if that's the word. uh, whenever I move forward with this concept of awareness, enlighten, things like that, and oneness, all the news outside start to like be more deep on it, on the physicality of things. The science start to roll out more news about these concepts, and it is a synchronicity that it really help you to understand that you are going in the right path, to find yourself in a better place, because the better place is always there. It's just that you didn't recognize it. You are just uncovering, I mean, you're just realizing that the darkness shouldn't be avoided in the first place. Should be looked at and like go through without fear, because right afterwards you can find another whole new world for yourself. So I guess that's my sharing, because I love this kind of subjects, and I always like trying to connect the dots with what I'm doing with A Course in Miracles. And now my life, it's like this kind of example of how this is an analogy of what science are now getting into, because it is all consciousness. So if we don't consider ourselves as one, if you don't consider that your worst enemy is yourself, and that's why you're having conflict with the other person, then you will not be able to move forward from the darkness to another, no, to another new whole world. So I guess that's my sharing for today.
I
A
Mary,
wanted
I
to
whole
would
jump
like
in.
to.
new
Oh,
world.
can I jump
Mhm.
in real quick?
Sure.
My question is, with the darkness and being and welcoming the darkness, um, I get that we need that it kind of contains everything and we shouldn't avoid it. My thing is mostly you were talking about anxiety earlier, Mary, and I that's my thing, if I want to call it that, is anxiety and worry. And I will find longer and longer moments of peace of mind, and then all of a sudden there's this attack, that I feel from within about me. It's usually not about others; it's about me. Um, when is this? I'm thinking, this is exhausting. Why do I have to have this argument? Mary or anyone, how did you get past the arguments that come up? And I'm better able to objectify these things and have awareness and give them space. That does seem to help. But I'd love any tips or tools to, and I know applying these lessons that we have help, but maybe anything specific I'd love to hear, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm ready to, do this thing. And then there's this internal attack from my mind about what I shouldn't or shouldn't be doing. And then there's this whole conversation going on. And I'm like, why is this still coming up? And even though I'm moving in the right direction, I know I'm moving in the right direction. My heart feels that. So sometimes it's a little annoying and exhausting. I know I have to, and it's okay. I allow myself, send myself love in those moments, and I'm patient with myself. But I'm ready to move on, and you know, I'd love to hear any comments on that.
Should I respond? Bob, did you want to respond?
Please. Absolutely. Mary, you are some brilliant mind about the
Thank you. I
physics of this. Oh my God. And I love it. And I can't wait to also speak, but I really want to hear what you're going to say, Mary. Sure.
I get my physics knowledge because I'm the byproduct of a nuclear physicist mother and an architect father. So I get philosophy and spirituality from my dad and physics and science from my mom. So I'm somehow straddling the two things. Somebody mentioned Gaia, and Adriana, you mentioned it. I wonder if you've come across Nassim Haramian and his unified theory of science and what he says about black holes, because if you're interested in that, you will love that. So Anybody
Oh,
who
can
has
you
that?
send me in the back channel in a moment? Can you
Yes,
send me
I'll
the?
send
Oh,
it.
thank
Nassim
you, Mary.
Haranian is his name, and he is just an incredible, incredible physicist. And anyway, I digress because that's not the point here. So let's talk about the darkness and the shadow. One of the things that has helped me for my anxiety is that one of the things is we, as human beings, we've been taught that darkness is bad, shadow is bad, light is good. I would like to reframe that and say to you that in this world, there is no such thing as good or bad. The night is not any better or worse than the day. They just have their own individual functions. The reason that we think darkness is bad is because our eyes see differently and less in the night than they do in the day. And our brain, which is a label making machine, likes the abundance of information because it can sort through them and it can give you more options when it can see more things. So it feels more comfortable and more certain in the day. It needs to rely on intuition a little bit more at night. And because we're not attuned into our intuition, we feel uncertain in the dark. And we say things like the triumph of light over darkness, good versus evil. Dark is not evil. We are both sides of this coin. We as individuals have both yin and yang within us, lightness and dark within us. So the idea is not to demonize the darkness or to try to get rid of our quote unquote dark parts, but rather learn how to love them, learn how to love those pieces of us that we have left behind in trauma and we have dismembered from ourselves. For me, one of the things that has really helped is doing inner child meditations where I go back into moments of trauma and I re-accept the version of myself that was left out in the dark. And this is what I call remembering, because to me, the opposite of remember is not forget, it's dismember. And we have been dismembered through these moments of trauma in our life that then we call the shadow, that then we call the darkness. So that's one thing. That's one of the things that will heal. So learning to go into that darkness, learning to go into those moments of pain and actually reclaiming yourself is going to be a very effective healing modality that not a lot of psychologists will teach you because they want to medicate you. They want to tell you that they can change, they can reverse engineer your consciousness based on your brain chemistry. Why? Because they start from a false fallacy. Your consciousness and your patterns of thought will change your brain chemistry. They think by changing the brain chemistry, they can then change the thoughts, but it doesn't work that way. Uh, it's actually a false fallacy. They just stop you from feeling what you're feeling when they medicate you. On the other side, one of the things that will help with anxiety is recognizing that because your brain is a pattern making machine, it is very loyal to its patterns. So when you start to get anxious thoughts and anxious feelings, you are either in the fear of something that has happened in the past and you don't want to repeat that, or you are in the fear of the uncertainty of future. In both cases, you are not present in the here and now. If you go into a moment of anxiety and start to feel insecure within yourself, that's what anxiety is. You feel insecure first, there's a feeling first, and then thoughts take over because it was big enough of a disturbance that it took your attention, it took your consciousness, and then thoughts get involved. And those thoughts are not going to shut up. So the point is not to engage with those thoughts rather than trying to find them an answer. Because the answers will come at continuum. The questions, it's like a sophist. In philosophy, we have these people. Socrates was considered one of the greatest sophists. No matter what answer you give it, it will bring up another contrary question. So one of the greatest things I can tell you is when you get anxious, come back to the present moment. Ask yourself, what is really threatening me? Is there a lion chasing me? Is there a fire in my house? Is there a reason for me physically to feel alarmed in this moment? And if not, where is this thought coming from? Where is the underlying thought that somebody taught me when they taught me how to be somebody, and how can I change that? That awareness, that ability to be able to step back and disassociate is the thing that is going to start helping you get control over your anxiety. Janine, I don't know if that helped any.
Thank you, Mary. That helped a lot, actually. And I do know that intellectually. And then in those moments, and that was key, is not engaging, because the thoughts, because they're gonna come anyway. And you're certainly right about that. And I just have to remember not to let these feelings go into overwhelmment, because once they get into that level, it's harder to come back. I can do it, but and just really continuing to practice presence and continue with meditation. Thank you so much.
The,
So I have Adriana. Did you go? Want to say something?
yeah, it's just that I remember
I think
something that
Jenny had. I think Jenny. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think Jenny had something that she wanted to say earlier. She had asked if she could speak.
yeah, you're right. Hello, Jeannie.
Are you
The mic
talking to
is
me?
here.
I'm never sure if you're. Are you there?
We are
Sure,
Yes,
we
we can
hear
hear
here.
you.
you.
Were you speaking to me?
Yeah, she's
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was.
remembering that you were going to say something to us, and
Yes.
she's giving you the
I've
space.
been listening to all of this and trying to process everything, and I'm a bit different always. When I was raised by parents who had absolutely no interest in me. They were not abusive. They were neglectful. My mother was uh, kind of a diva, and my father worked 7 days a week. My mother was forced to marry my father by her father, who would not let her marry a Jewish boy that she worked with, or a Jewish man. So I was kind of raised without any. I just grew up. I was fed and dressed and never really had any close contact with my parents, or was told that I was loved, or and it's not a sad thing. In a way, it turned out to be a good thing because I wasn't raised with a lot of ideas or rules or any. I just kind of was clueless, and I have gotten very smart. I have learned a lot, but I'm still kind of clueless about people, and I just go forward and kind of accept what's going on and don't worry about it, and it's turned out fine. And I have learned with my kids and my grandkids to be different. So my world, I've had my ups and downs. I've had to learn, but I knew I had to learn. I was smarter than I thought, and along the way, I've continued, and I still continue to this day to learn new things. So maybe I approach the world from a different way, and I just look around me and figure things out. I question things. I do my research. I learn, and if I have a problem, I try to figure out why and what I can do about it. But I don't judge people or really worry about them. I just go along in my, and I'm a Pisces. I'll be 84 uh, on the 23rd of this month. So I'm in my own little happy world with my cat, and it's working for me. Thank you.
Love it.
Thank
That's
I
you.
love
awesome.
you,
Will.
Jenny. That
Thank,
was wonderful.
Yeah, it's,
thank.
I always thought that um, growing up, I didn't know any better. Of course, in those days, you didn't know anything, and nobody knew anything, and there was none of this kind of talk. There was not this learning that we have today, and I think it's wonderful. And I think people should do their research. When I don't understand something, I go back and I find that a lot of people just listen, and they never really take it in or take it to the limit, which I take everything to the limit and find out do my research so I'm comfortable with the decision that I make. And
Yeah, they never question. Yep.
that's, I don't think people, and especially in these times, I am finding out that people listen less, and you can tell them things, and people don't seem to have their heads on straight anymore. They are just trying to survive. They're not thinking of the world. They're not thinking of what we're doing to the world. They're just in kind of a herd of sheep, just going along trying to uh, survive, which I understand. But we have to bring people back to reality and thinking. I think thinking is a good thing. So with that,
Linda.
I'm landing my plane. I think we
Thank
should
you,
have a
Jenny.
room that says just think. Just, you know,
Yes.
think, listen, look. You know, the old stop, look, and listen? I think that people should do that before they do things. They should stop, look, and listen and understand before they make a decision. But that's just me. So that's
And
my
we are
share.
you, so that's a beautiful share and a wonderful perspective on everything that we are speaking. And thank you, Will, for letting us know that we were missing Jeannie's intervention, because she always brings so many new stories to our room. So thank you very much, Will. Linda, welcome. I thought you raised your hand. Do you want to share something with us?
I'm just in for listening for the moment, but it was a wonderful share. Bob, did you have a question?
Yes. Yes. Okay. I did. And, well, I don't know if it's a question, but I'd like to just share. I also am an architect, Mary, and been an architect for a long time. Um, actually, over 40 years licensed. I was thinking about that the other day. And many years ago, about 50, 56 years ago almost, um, I had a revelation about dimensions. Everybody talks about dimensions, and oh, in this dimension we do this, and in that dimension we do that, and there are strings, and the strings do this and that. I think a lot of the strings get tied into knots, but just that's just using it in a way of speaking. What I'd like to suggest is that the idea of dimensions is something that, as an architect, I recognize as extremely important. If I want a building to stand up after we build it, I have to design it in such a way that there are dimensions that say a concrete foundation has to be 6 inches deep. And if the soil says to me by the studies, oh, this soil is not going to be able to withstand that, then I may have to go to 8 inches deep or 10 inches deep. Then, using the engineering information that comes to me from the dimensions, the clarity, the descriptions of what that soil is, then I can make sure that it's going to be on a firm foundation. Maybe it's going to be 2 feet thick. I actually, in Florida, had to do an oil change facility which was underground, where the person goes under a car and looks up and changes the oil. Well, when you go 7 feet down into Florida, you're in the water. And we had a foundation that was 2 feet thick. It wasn't so much that it was supporting something, it was otherwise going to just float on the water. And then you got a building that's just going here and there. If that makes any sense, I hope it does.
He had to build a
But
boat, basically.
dimensions, dimensions are so important to me in creating anything. So, what is it? What is a dimension? A dimension is something between 2 points. And you say this is 2 feet between these 2 points. All right, well, that's 2 points, and they're apart from each other. They don't agree with each other. They're dots, and those dots don't have any dimension. They are dimensionless. That is the theorem that explains how dimensions start. They start with a point, and we could even say a point. Well, that's like making it's an idea. Okay, so you have that's one dimension. Then you add another dimension, and you get like a piece of paper has length and width. Then I add another dimension, and I get the third dimension, and that gives me more understanding of what's going on because it has a third dimension. Then comes the fourth dimension, which I call time. And time is the dimension that most of us are in. Now, why are dimensions important? Because scientists are constantly trying, by definition, to dimension what they see. They want to put you said label, I love label, that we're labeling machine. They want to explain something, and they can do it first by dimensioning it, by saying this is small, that's big, this is a part of that, and here's how it fits. Because this is 1 inch, that's 12 inches. Okay, this 1 inch is 1/12 of that. And they measure things. Scientists are all about measuring things because if they can't measure it, then they don't have a grasp of it. They don't understand it. And I would like to venture that what you were talking about before and what Tom said was it was hand in glove, that the idea of dark matter versus light matter is simply light matter has some light shining on it, and I can therefore measure it. So it's measurable, that means it's real. If I can't measure it, it means one of two things: I don't understand it, or I just can't see it. So this dark matter, to me, and I love everything that you've been saying, the dark matter is simply that part of our entire, this whole ball of wax, the part that we can't measure yet. The scientists can't explain it. If there's no light on it, they simply say it's dark matter. They don't know what else to call it. It's dark because they can't dimension it. They can't measure it. They can't put a handle on it. And there's a simple reason for that. It's bigger than their minds. And I would submit that God is simply all of the dark matter anybody ever tried to conceive of, and all of the light matter that anyone ever tried to conceive of. And the dark matter, the black holes, are simply those things which we've identified that we can't measure. We can measure everything else. Fine, you got bosons and croutons and and all of these other little teeny tiny quantum things. But the bigger things they haven't quite yet figured out, so they call it dark matter. Maybe that 95% is what's left over with God that our human minds can't conceive of yet. So I say we have a mind. We are trying to get into that dark matter, which all of us in this room this morning agreed, which is better than most people on earth, that dark matter is probably a very good thing. Dark matter might be the very best thing that no one else knows how to measure. They can't put a handle around it. They can't. I have one of these uh, plastic blow up balls that you get in, you see in a gym that you can sit on, do all kinds of exercises. And in order for me to know that it's as big as it's supposed to be, they put a tape around it. And when it comes back around to where it starts, then I know that I have blown it up to the right size. They gave me something to measure by. Measuring is what dimensions are for. If you can't put a handle around it, if you can't understand it, you dissociate from it. And that's the words you used before. In fact, I'm not even sure if Mary said it or Tom said it or who. It doesn't matter. We dissociate because we don't understand it. Isn't that what racism is? It's present everywhere. I am now working in a country called Liberia in Africa. Why would they get a big old white boy like me to help organize what they're going to do with their country when they finally mine the incredible amount of gold and diamonds that is under the ground? Well, I don't understand that, but God does. And that's the word I use for all that matters. All the matter, whether it's dark or white or light. And I call the fifth dimension light, because that's when everything becomes enlightened and we all move from where we are into a much, much, much better world, an easier world, when things that we can't understand, the dark matter, is now enlightened. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Oh, that's great, Bob. It has all to do with everything that we have been speaking about, like since yesterday, and the theory of color. In fact, there was a moment when you mentioned the word matter, but in fact, it's really like the word says it all, because it represents matter, but it's all that matters. So it's wonderful. I just wanted to share something about I don't know if it was Janine or Dr. Natalie that wanted like kind of um, um, like practical way to move around these things
That
of
was
an
me,
attack.
Janine.
Yeah, right, Janine. So what I understand is like when we have an attack in a conflict. I mean, you're having an argument with somebody, for example. So you're
Mine
having
is
an
mine is usually internal,
yeah, in fact, yeah, of course. So
but
you're
not
having this
about
attack.
somebody else. It's usually me. It's usually a judgment about
Okay,
myself.
well,
Yeah,
that's an
that's
attack
my
thought.
thing.
That's an attack thought, in
Right.
fact. So that thought will create like anger or sadness or fear. That's the judgment, right? Or it will create a desire to help. So if you have that desire to help, and you can understand that you can only give help to yourself. So what are the facts? It's just that I was in the plane yesterday and I wrote like this kind of like a structure here in my notebook. I'm seeing that it's like really a thought process. If you're having an attack, you can have several meanings of it in terms of negative feelings, and that's just a judgment. But there's always a desire to help. So if you're having conflict within yourself or outside yourself, whatever it is, you just only need to maintain the thought that you can only give help to yourself. So what are the facts? What is the content over the form? If you are having like a conflict within yourself, because I don't know, you're looking at the mirror and you start to say that you start to hear within yourself that you are worthless, or that you are not pretty, or that you feel old, or whatever kind of negative thought, is just a thought. But what is the content of that thought? Because the form was okay, saying that you are ugly or that you are worthless. What is the content of that? Where that comes from? So you keep your mind like in an open. I don't know if everybody remembers that in some sessions. Ago, I I was so thrilled because what is helpful from Tom's book is that he always ends the notes with a question, and remain your brain in a question mode. It's letting God do its job. If you try to give an answer or a close like statement, then you are just like not letting God inspire you. So if it's worth it, Janine, every time you have an attack thought and a conflict, just try to put those like um, feelings like in one basket, and in the other basket you will have only a desire to help, and the help only comes and goes in within you. So what are the facts of that situation. It's like this thought process. What are the facts? What is the content over the form that I'm having right now in this specific content? And keeping the mind open in questions will allow the Holy Spirit to inspire you with some kind of information that you were dismissing, because the conflicts appears in your life because you are dismissing something. Sin, as a word, is not something. I mean, in Aramaic, sin doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. It's just missing the mark. So if you're thinking that you're sinner, it's just that you are missing some mark. What is the mark that you're missing?
It's typically
So,
for me something like, oh, you can't do this. And I know where it comes from. I know
okay,
because I've always had big dreams. I've always
yeah,
been considered super intelligent. And then I'm not pointing fingers or anything. I'll just say my family has always been, I think what underlies their hesitance is just fear. Um, when I want to explore, do something big, oh, honey, you can't do that. You can't go there. Why would you want to do that? And then it has like really clipped my wings over the years. And so, particularly after my divorce and finding I had to kind of start all over in life again, um, just all these things came up um, because, I was taught that, you have to get married, you should get married. Um, it was just kind of everything. And I know where it comes from, because my parents' marriage failed and my dad wasn't the kind of dad my mom wanted to marry or who she wanted to marry. So she always had this idealized image of marriage because my grandparents had a beautiful marriage. They had kind of the June Cleaver textbook, Cosby, family upbringing kind of thing. Mom stayed at home and did the cooking and she was, all that good stuff. And my mom didn't find that for herself. So of course she wanted it for me. It was just everything. And I remember that wasn't everything for me when I was in college. Like I just wanted the world. I wanted to explore. I wanted to have this fabulous career. And nobody really ever supported me in that. And didn't really know how to stand up for myself. So I ended up in this world that, was beautiful. I'm not complaining at all. I've had a beautiful life. Because I married someone who was just so kind and brilliant and wonderful and have great kids. But then finding the road back to myself, you know, it was like, well, who am I now? When the marriage dissolved, who am I? And so on that road, that journey, I trace back to the roots of it. And it's always, I find it comes from that source. When I go to try to do something new and exciting and knowing I'm capable, but it's always this self-attack that comes up, these little voices that come up. And that's where
that's the
I'm at.
darkness. Yeah, that's the
Mm-hmm.
darkness or the black hole. So you need to just. It's like the example, the gift that Luisa gave us yesterday. Luisa told us that every February 3rd for her is such a hard day because of what happened with her ex-husband that died, and what the release that she felt yesterday came from the idea that you can feel pain. I mean, you can feel sad about the things that you lived in the past, because that sadness or that hesitation are within you right now. You cannot just take it away. As Stephanie said, you cannot take off the energy. You just need to replace it. So if you're having those judgments that now know where they come from, and you're having like these new experiences and you're holding yourself back because you think that those kind of experiences in the past are like a mark on your way to approach new things that you're excited about and will make you like be hesitant, then you get to embrace that as part of you, but with love, because that part of you gave you some new like learning. I mean, what was the biggest learning for you in that part of your life? What was the best message that you can like rescue from those hard situations? and you stick with that because that was the reason why you lived those, and you can experience like pain or sadness, but you can see that with love, because if you don't see it with love, then you cannot like move forward. Darkness always is scary. I mean, I had a phobia in my entire life about darkness, and it's scary. It can paralyze you. But if you allowed yourself just to look at that darkness and try to see that there is God in there, because it's just the sum of all colors, then you will be able to walk your life with your darkness by your side, because it was there in some part of your history, and it was useful for something. Then you can walk around your life with your darkness, but not letting that darkness be in control. I mean, the control, you need to surrender to something higher than you, because you are not the one who does things. I mean, you're just willing to let God do the things through you, so you can experience more peaceful
Something here, Kim.
approach with the pain. Don't worry, don't worry. You can experience more it's like a tender way to review your past, because you will always feel sadness and pain about the things that you were in the past. But as long as you can find what was the biggest gift that experience gave you, you can feel it with love, and that switch something inside of us, and let us like move a little bit forward, move a little towards something new, towards, even if you're scared, you move forward and you move forward, and you just go through the darkness and see the light again. I hope it helps, Janine, because I know how hard it is to overcome those experiences in our minds and in our hearts. But all is worth it. I mean, in the universe, there's no waste. So we should only try to find like the biggest gift those experiences gave us, for us to continue our journey.
May I
Yeah,
say something
that
again?
was very helpful. Thank you.
May I chime in again as the old girl?
I
I
love you, Jeannie, of course.
I started my travel agency when I was 48 years old. I just always wanted to do it. I didn't think anything. I I tell you, being kind of clueless is a good thing, because I just, as my kids will tell you, I've always done whatever I wanted to do. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, I do something else. But I got into this travel business in Texas when the oil boom went bust. And a man in my building said I was the stupidest lady in the county to start a travel agency when everything was going wrong. And I thought, I don't care. Maybe it's a good time. And it turned out it was a good time, because if I had started in the middle of everything going well, I don't know if I would have succeeded. I knew nothing about the travel business. My family had many businesses over the years, but I sent my daughters to travel school, and we started off and we wound up traveling the world. I had a car go through my desk and destroy my office. I had my biggest business fail, and people kept saying to me,
Oh
"Well,
my
you can quit
gosh.
now." And yes, I had a car. I was my biggest business had failed, and I had to move out of the building, and I was out getting keys made for a new office, and a guy from across the hall who is an architect had a diabetic coma and drove his car through my desk where I wasn't sitting. And I just go along cluelessly. I do this, I do that. Why be scared? You're alive.
You're right.
What? Why be scared? If you fail, I think it was Abraham Lincoln that failed 100 times. Every time something went wrong, I learned something, and I just went on and did. Honestly, I am going to be 84, and I still do things. My kids are so concerned about me because they never know what the hell I'm going to do, or if they're going to see my name in the paper, they just hope I don't do anything serious so it it reflects on them, but they know they can't tell me what to do, and nobody has ever been able to tell me what to do because I do what I want to do. And why?
Jenny, I love you. I'm also a Piscean, and I'm going to be 77 in about 2.5, 3 weeks.
Yes,
And
we'll have a party.
absolutely, Lee has been wondering what I'm going to do next for years,
Yes,
and so has my wife, for that matter. I don't.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
have I.
my grandson is 24. He's a second lieutenant. He's very military. And when he took me to a doctor one day, and he said, "Now, grandmother, when we go in here, use your quiet voice. Don't say anything to anybody about me because I'm always bragging about him." He said, "Just sit quietly, play games on your phone." They
That's so
worry
funny.
about me.
Because it's true.
Use your
You're
quiet
wonderful,
voice.
Jenny, and
Wow.
you're
And
wonderful.
but it's fun. I raised my kids so they were worried about me. I didn't have to worry about them. They worried about, God, what's she going to do next? And my husband had a federal career, so we moved all the time. So they never had a chance to get settled. So I always kept them on the edge, and they grew up, and they are wonderful, but they still worry about me. They would like me to go sit in a corner and knit, but I can't knit. But anyhow, I do what the hell I do,
You
and
know,
why
we
not?
have that in common, Jenny. I do that. I mean, I
Wait,
started
the
my
knitting?
company
No.
in 2015, and I do that. I run headlong and I just do stuff. And but then what stops me, probably my business would be twice as big by now if I hadn't allowed these little voices to take over. Because I'm a Gemini, so I'm very like, let's just go, let's do. Like I'm
Yes,
planning to go to Tanzania probably, hopefully this year.
right,
And so I just do stuff. Yeah, my kids are used to that. They're same thing. They're kind of looking at me like, what's mom gonna do next?
right. I
And
I've
it's
traveled.
just dealing with these voices
Yes,
that
I've
slow me
I've
down.
traveled to over 50 countries, and my kids used to say, if my friend and I got kidnapped, we'd be brought back right away.
I love that. That's
And
so
there's
uh,
nothing better than keeping your kids on edge and nervous, and sometimes I'll just say, I got an idea. Wait for it, and I won't tell them what it is. And on I'll say this quickly, and I'll stop talking. We went out to lunch on Saturday, and I said I had an announcement to make. And my son-in-law said, "Wait till I'm 2 beers in before you tell me." So,
thank you,
I love
so,
it.
Jenny. Oh
so,
my goodness,
so
Oh
that's
my
helpful.
goodness.
I,
And
I,
I'd
I.
So,
like to,
Okay, I'm
Jenny,
going to be
I'd like
quiet.
to. No, that's okay. I love you. I think that here's what I'd like to say, and this is kind of a summation, at least the way I see it. What I called the fifth dimension is simply like a big car wash. I have a little car, a Mini Cooper, and right now it's sitting outside and it has a cover over it because I don't have a garage here. And I put the cover on it and it sort of keeps it protected because a lot of the trees here drop this gummy stuff on the car and make it look unattractive. So I put this cover on it. But when I take it off, the car is clean. And when I wash the car, it's really gorgeous because I can see the whole car. I don't have a bunch of little black specks and stuff on it. There's nothing dark anymore. It's all enlightened. I can see it. I can measure everything if I wanted to, which I don't. And I want to suggest that the fifth dimension truly is enlightened and it is where light is, but it's also where love is because the things that Adriana has been saying are about love, yet we're talking about the same objects. The things I'm saying, we're talking about light and we're talking about the same objects. The things that Mary has been saying from the physics point of view are all the same thing. So what I would say to the scientist is simply be brave and go where it's dark. That is the place that they're going to find excitement, they're going to find joy, because just no one ever understood it before. They couldn't dimension it, they couldn't grasp it, they couldn't hold on to it. So if as Tom said, we've only understood 5% of all existence, there's a lot more to discover. One is there's a lot of people, as we know, who are afraid of people who don't look like them. This is the
Yes.
answer to that, is to understand if something doesn't look like you, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just something you haven't figured out yet. If you can embrace it and you can love it, you can add it to all those things that have been dimensioned, and then you've got more of the actual truth. I also
Yeah.
want to say that Mary said a little while ago, I think she's not here anymore with us, but I back channeled her, and she's Iranian, Persian, and the greatest architect, in my opinion, that ever existed on this planet was a woman named Zaha Hadid. She passed away just a couple of 3 years ago. The work that she put out and that her company is still doing is amazing. It's way beyond. If you've ever seen some really far out images of something that's either going to be built or already built, all you have to do is look up Zaha, that's Zaha, Hadid, Hadid, and you'll see amazing things. She brought ideas to light so that they could be built and bring joy to all of us. I think that we're all talking about the same thing, and I think it brings us right back to the meditation of today. Let's face it, today was the first day that we really started to get lessons that turn us around. We find out that we are very holy. Lee, take it from here.
Alrighty, sure thing. So we're going to come back to the lesson of the day. My mind is part of God's. I'm very holy. Let's take a minute to kind of set ourselves up to remind ourselves of this idea a couple of times throughout the day. So back in the lesson. So we're going to have 3 5-minute practice periods today. And we'll knock our first one out right now. And then, imagine to yourself a good time to finish off the day, and sometime in the early afternoon or lunchtime, whatever's convenient. You're going to close your eyes and search your mind for different, just descriptive terms of how you see yourself. Some are positive, some are negative, some might be grandiose, some might be your worst hidden fear, or the thing you're most embarrassed about, or whatever. You don't have to say it out loud or anything. All you have to do is allow it to cross your mind here. All of these thoughts about yourself are equally unreal because we don't look on ourselves through the eyes of holiness. So, as these thoughts come to your mind, you'll get negative ones and positive ones. The thought to repeat is, my mind is part of God's and I am holy. So you might think that your life is being imposed upon, and the lesson says, I see myself as being imposed upon, or depressed, or failing, endangered, helpless, victorious, losing out, charitable, virtuous. However you think about yourself, we're not trying to evaluate it, but just apply this idea. Your mind is part of God's, and you are holy. This is how we bring God back into our minds to guide us throughout the day, and that's what this lesson's about. So we've got about 5 minutes on the clock. want you to start thinking about, how do you think about yourself? Your mind is a part of God's, and you're very holy. What's something else that you think about when you think about yourself and how others see you, or how you want to be seen by others? Your mind is a part of God's mind, and you are very holy. My mind is part of God's, and I am holy. My mind is a part of God's, and I am very holy. What else is in your mind about yourself? Have your thoughts about yourself evolved as you've come through the last several years? Do you know yourself better now? Think about those views and how they've changed. Your mind is a part of God's. You are very holy. This is how you welcome God back into your mind so He can show you the path. The longer you look behind, sometimes the better you can see your way forward. And as long as you're here in the moment, you ask for within for the guidance. It'll point you in the right way. Have some faith. So, if you'll remember one or two more times to think this, and then throughout the day, as you come across different things where you have a view upon yourself and you're like, oh, that's something that I could have thought of earlier. That's something you can name right there, right that moment, where you can say, but my mind is a part of God's. I'm very holy. I was thinking about myself, man, my hair looks terrible today. And then that was perfect. And I realized I just got to go get some pomade and put it in my hands and rub it through my hair. And then that looks great. That's all it takes. I sure am fortunate I got good hair. So there's vanity for myself. For part of my mind. Mind is a part of God. and I'm very holy. So use this to detach yourself from your ego a little bit. Laugh at yourself a little bit, but have a great day. God wants us to be happy. That's why we're here. So take this as a light-hearted message and go about your day with a light heart and have a fantastic day, everybody. I'll be here tomorrow at 6:30 to do lesson 36. Nope. Yeah, that's right. Lesson 36. Okay, good. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Lee. Bye.
Great day. Namaste. Bye.
Namaste.
Thank you,
Namaste.
everybody.
Thank
We
you.
love you.
I love you too. Love everyone.
Thank you, Jeannie. Love to have you here. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
I love you, Linda. Oh, everybody's leaving. Louisa, so great to have you here. Andy, everybody. And Ginny, you are some piece of work. Now that I know you're also a Piscean, we can just confuse all of them together.
Oh,
Just
I'm a
keep on
Pisces.
guessing. Pisceans rock. And so does everybody else.
And is the tiger year as well. I'm a tiger, so in the Chinese calendar.
I will hear you roar. I expect to hear you
I am
roar.
already.
Oh my goodness. How beautiful everything is. How wonderful this morning's session was. It was